My daughter's actually a middle school teacher, a math teacher, and I always talk to her about that. Unless AI is going to become empathetic, I don't think there's going to be a reason to not have teachers in front of kids. Now, that said, is she going to have more tools? Is there going to be more automation in the way you can generate the information to make your job better, right? And make the children learn more easily, of course, right?
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on this show. And of course, the added bonus, you get one AI fun fact each week. Today's fun fact comes to us from Nilay Patel, who writes in The Verge that AI copyright laws could make the whole industry extinct. In it, Nilay, who is a lawyer by training, says all the big generative AI models from every company are trained on huge swaths of data that are scraped from the entire internet. And big media companies like, say, the New York Times and Getty Images have filed lawsuits recently against those AI companies, saying they're stealing their work and profiting from it. AI is challenging the fair use doctrine written into the Copyright Act a long time ago. How the courts rule on what is fair use when it comes to AI training data could create an extinction-level event for the modern AI industry on the level of what, say, Napster and other file-sharing sites faced in the early 2000s. Stay tuned to future episodes where we'll unpack new AI copyright laws as they emerge. For now, go listen to great episodes from this podcast's archives with the likes of Robert Plotkin and Daniel Davila, who owns AI-generated content. And specifically, we discuss in those important episodes how pending lawsuits are impacting Hollywood as well as other industries. Of course, we'll link to the full article in today's show notes. Now, shifting to this week's conversation. Tamara Steffens is the managing director of Thomson Reuters Ventures, a $100 million corporate VC. She previously led investing in venture capital partnerships in North America and India for M12, Microsoft's venture fund. Earlier in her career, Tamara scaled teams, infrastructures, and products. Startups including early mobile and SaaS pioneers like Boingo, Software.com, Fusion One, and Color. And she's led large teams as an exec at Microsoft and Openwave. Tamara started her tech career at Sun Microsystems in Silicon Graphics and has architected many partnerships that went on to define whole industries. She has a BS in finance from Michigan State University, go Sparties, and sits on the Broad Business School board for Michigan State, as well as the National Advisory Council on Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the U.S. Department of Commerce. Without further ado, Tamara, it's my pleasure to welcome you to AI and the Future of Work. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and how you get into corporate VC.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. And you did a great job. You gave my whole career there in about 60 seconds, which I love. Yeah, just ended up in tech early in my career, as you pointed out, at Sun and Silicon Graphics. Kind of went on from there in the beginning days of the startup world, I guess, if you will, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's been really fun ever since. You and I were chatting a little bit about how we've both been around mobile messaging, I think, forever, right? And how many times people have said, oh, we're going to get away from email, but we never do. We all still use way too much email, but it's fine. It's been a cornerstone of my career, being at 3 different email companies, all of them having mobile access. But yeah, now at Thomson Reuters, came over here a couple of years ago at the request of their CEO and team to start their venture fund, their corporate venture fund. And it's been fabulous. It's been a great couple of years. We've made 17 investments now. We did 9 last year, and 8 of the 9 were in AI. So we definitely, as a company, are leaning in because of the categories we are focused on. And that's been super exciting as well.
What lessons did you learn as an operator for so many years at companies like what we both mentioned that have made you a better investor?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've always been on the go-to-market side, more the chief revenue officer driving revenue. And I think that's the best place you can come from as an investor, in my opinion. I know there's plenty of technologists that are great investors as well. But I think, generating revenue and getting to cash flow positive and getting to profitability are all steps you have to take, to have a good outcome or a good exit. And I tend to constantly look at that when I'm talking with founders and when I'm looking at investments, really, what are they doing, right? How are they going to get to both product market fit? Because we generally do Series A, so it can be a little bit pre-market fit. What is the product market fit? How can they generate enough revenue to have a reasonable exit? Because even though we're a corporate fund, we're absolutely focused on the financial return of the fund, right? And we do that by aligning strategically, but we're really focused on how do we get a return on the things we invest in.
You're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who may never have pitched to a corporate VC. Talk about the difference between a corporate VC like M12 or now Thomson Reuters and a non-corporate VC.
Yeah, there's probably only slight differences. I would say there's more similarities than differences, but the differences are really going to be around, can you align with them from a go-to-market strategy, or would they be a great customer? So we tend to look at things, if we're buying or investing in, say, infrastructure technology, would we use this for ourselves? And so our internal teams will look at it as we do our diligence. Or can we help them go to market? Is it something, that can sit adjacent to some of the things we're already doing so that we can help them go to market, right? So we kind of look at it one of two ways, where traditional VCs are really just looking at return, right? So how are they going to get the return? How is this company going to get to product market fit, profitability, and an exit that makes sense? We tend to take a couple more points as we're looking at it and how we can align with them so that we can actually help them. I mean, our money's just as green as anybody else's, but why take it if we can't help you, right? I always say that to founders, don't take corporate money unless you know how they're going to help you.
Is it a better route to Thomson Reuters through a business sponsor or through the venture arm if you're looking for an investment?
Yeah, we don't require a business sponsor for any of our deals. And in fact, we haven't had any business sponsors on the things we've invested in to date. That's not to say it's not possible or it's not a good idea. If one of our business folks brought us a good introduction or a company they saw in the market, we would absolutely take a look at it. And we have had a couple of ideas, mostly focused on areas of interest and areas that we need tech or a partner or something that is Horizon 3. We're generally looking at Horizon 3 things, right? And internally, our developers and engineers are focused on Horizon 1 and a bit of Horizon 2. So we tend to be a little further out there in what we're looking at and what we're investing in. But we make our own decisions as a fund. We do, from a diligence perspective, align with strategy and with product to make sure that, we can help these companies we're investing in, right? We're not going to go invest in, something that makes no sense for Thomson Reuters at all.
Presumably you prefer to lead versus follow?
We actually don't lead, but we often write the biggest check. We kind of keep that to ourselves, though, and we like to get between 5 and 7% of, the investment. So of the company that we invest in, it tends to be a decent sized check. Series A, our check size is usually 3 to 7 million. We'll help structure the deal. We know a lot of VCs that we've already done a bunch of deals with, and from my past VCs that I've done deals with. So we're happy to come in and try to construct the deal if we need to. But I would say most of the time we get invited. Like, the founder knows us, so they'll invite us in because we've been working with them and we've been a good partner and we've been helping them to begin with. Or, the venture funds know us from what we do, from Thomson Reuters and from deals that we've done either with them or in the industry. So they'll call and say, would you like to fill out a round? So we generally don't lead.
It's an amazing portfolio, so whatever you're doing is working. Let's take a case study. So take one of those recent, maybe AI-focused investments that you made. Tell us how you met the founder, how the round came together, and what was the investment thesis.
Yeah, it's super recent. I'll give you one that we did recently. We actually met Ripple Ventures, a small seed, but very active seed investor out of the Canadian market. We're Canadian headquartered. Our fund is headquartered in New York. We invest globally. But this happens to be a Canadian investor that we met. And he said, hey, there's this company that's going to be doing their Series A. It's a company called WiseDocs. They do claims processing, AI-based claims processing for insurance companies. So if you think about it, what happens in the United States is if you file a claim for a health claim, it is actually not processed by Cigna or Blue Cross, right? It's actually processed by a third-party claims company. That's what's required. And often third-party claims companies have lawyers that help them, right? And they use law firms to help them determine which claims have more liability or are more serious, right? So they can get those paid quickly and get the person on the road to health, if you will, right? As fast as possible, because you want to make sure you're processing and paying out claims that have the most severity to them, right? So the technology is amazing. They had a ton of data because they were already, early stage. They were in this claims processing, so they could build models around it that were extremely accurate, right? So when the opportunity arose that they could apply that to all of their customers, which are these, thousands of claims processors in the United States and Canada, they could go in and say, you can use this tool to speed the processing, and they can sell it to law firms because law firms can use the same tool to read through these claims and try to help them, come to faster conclusions. Interesting that we met Ripple. They introduced us to the founder, and the Series A came together about 6 months later, and we just closed that right at the beginning of this year. And we're super excited about it because although it is health insurance claims or medical insurance claims, I shouldn't say health insurance claims, medical insurance claims or medical claims, it still makes sense because lawyers take a good hard look at that, right? And then the technology actually works in corporates. We have a big business in corporates, office of the CFO, right? We sell to the CFO, to the general counsel in most major corporations. This tech also works in that space because folks like Uber or DoorDash have their own claims, right? Because they have drivers, right? And people have accidents and things happen. And they've got to be able to process those claims very quickly too. So same type of technology can be applied at the general counsel level for these corporates that have similar processing needs, if that makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense at the apps level of the stack. But I also saw an investment in CentML, which I'd call more like at the infrastructure level of the stack. How do you reconcile that with the strategic alignment requirement with Thomson Reuters?
Yeah, great question. So we are also a company of a lot of technology solutions in legal, in tax, in risk and fraud, right? So we have our own machine learning models, right? And things that we've developed, old models and new models. CentML, we can use their technology internally to refine our models. I'm going to simplify this. I'm sure the CEO is not going to appreciate my simplification of the technology, but it's a very sophisticated compiler which allows you to run your models much faster and much cheaper. And it advises you on how to do that. So for us, using that type of technology internally just reduced our costs on our own models and our products that we're developing in both law and in tax.
Makes perfect sense when you say it that way. So I got to ask, so Thomson Reuters is obviously a publisher in addition to all of the other businesses that you mentioned company is in. And as a publisher, you must be thinking about some of the issues, like I mentioned in the fun fact about copyright infringement and some of the cases that are going through the courts. How do you think about the obligation of the foundation LLM providers to compensate content owners when they train their LLMs on other people's content?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a copyright lawyer and not involved in any of that background, lawsuits that are happening. I will say we have made it public that we have licensed our data to several of the large LLM providers. We've not shared who we've licensed it to, but you can make your own assumptions. So we've taken the approach where we are willing to license our data in some cases, right? And, in the case of Reuters, we've done that, right? So I think we are very much in favor of working together and allowing that licensing of data to build models, provided, we have an agreement that makes sense.
So you could have both a dual strategy where obviously you're going to use your own proprietary data to train your own models for your own products, but it doesn't preclude you from also licensing your content.
It does not, right? Exactly that. That is the strategy.
So a lot of what we talk about on this podcast is responsible AI. So all of the kind of ancillary implications of doing more with automation, whether it's on jobs or data privacy or certainly copyright infringement, and every aspect of our lives that AI might potentially touch. What does responsible AI mean to you, and how does that factor into decisions that you make when you're investing?
Yeah, we take it obviously as Reuters and Thomson Reuters, we take that very seriously. We have a whole team internally that just focuses on responsible AI and the way we develop our own products and what we invest in. I think it's an evolving area and it's going to continue to evolve and hopefully continue to get better. There are a lot of startups that are in the space now that are focused on responsible AI, and I think doing a very good job. We've talked to and looked at a number of them in there. Sorry about that. But we have done a number of, internal trials and looking at that. It's a core component of everything we develop to make sure we're looking at things from a responsible perspective.
Does any of that governance function within Thomson Reuters, is that required to assess investments? Is there any kind of an internal filter that your investments have to go through with regard to responsible AI?
I wouldn't say we have a formal internal filter, but definitely informal. So we have a labs organization in Toronto, but people are spread out actually in a number of places in Europe, et cetera. When we're investing in something, particularly companies that are focused on AI, we're absolutely involving our internal team to take a look at it, give us some feedback. One, because, as I shared with you, we either want to go to market with it, right? It's an area we don't have, but it can sit along something that we're already selling, maybe to a general counsel or to a head of corporate tax. There may be a great product that we can invest in. So we'll look at it from a go-to-market perspective, but from a technology perspective, our internal labs team often looks at what we're looking at as well. And they definitely have a lens from that perspective. So yes, I would say, it's not formal, but indirectly, yes, we do look at everything from that angle.
As an entrepreneur, I found for the first time raising money for PeopleRain that we're being asked as part of diligence for things like chain of custody agreements to be able to demonstrate where the data that we use in our AI has been, and to be able to validate that we are allowed to use it, allowed to train on it, and beyond what we, historically it would have been things like GDPR compliance and that sort of thing. But now that's actually extending into the data used to train our models. Sounds like maybe it's not a hard requirement, but something where you're aware of there needing to be some kind of governance related to the products you're investing in.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely, where is the data coming from? That's super important to us. We've tended to lean in a little bit in the last year on vertical AI solutions because it's natural for us, right? So from a legal or a tax perspective, we know those sources. So we're a little bit more experienced with our experts internally helping us tend to be able to confine what we're looking at from that perspective a little better, I think, than broad solutions that aren't vertical based. So I say it might be a little bit easier, but I think it is a tiny bit easier for us as we look at investments when we're looking at that angle.
One of the things that makes investing in AI startups, certainly at the Series A level, difficult today is that every startup in some way is competing with big tech. And every startup needs to defend why, because that startup lacks, a moat the size of OpenAI or Microsoft or Google or Amazon or Apple, et cetera, why they can overcome that inherent disadvantage because they lack the data and the compute resources. How do you think about startups and kind of competing with big tech when it comes to just some natural disadvantages versus big companies?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because if you look at some of the vertical AI solutions that are great in the market now, they're based on other LLMs, right? They're based on OpenAI or Cohere or, Anthropic. In a way, if they can get ahead in the market, just traction because they've developed a great solution and they know that they may need to change that underlying LLM so they have some flexibility there, I think they'll be okay, right? Because they're going to want to go with the least expensive but fastest, most accurate LLM for their solution, right? Which is going to differ depending on what type of solution you're developing. And eventually, perhaps they might write their own LLM. I think as this market, it's moving so quickly, I think there's a lot of components that can change. If if they can get traction, like I said, with this medical claims company that we talked about earlier, WiseDocs, their traction is incredible. And so they're already out there, and it's going to be tough, or it would be tough for somebody, one of the big incumbents to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to go do medical claims now. That's not something they've ever done. So we tend to look at vertical solutions where the incumbents aren't really going to go out and develop, legal solutions tomorrow, right? So if we can find somebody that understands that and understands how to build tech that is advanced and they can go grab market share, they have a good chance of winning in that space. So I think we look at it from a little bit of a different angle, and the cost shouldn't be too high if they're building solutions that are on existing LLMs that are, tuned.
So roll back the clock to November 2022 when OpenAI launched ChatGPT, and it spawned, probably call it a year of just unbridled euphoria and AI curiosity, and a lot of the first generation of AI first enterprise focused software companies like WiseDocs and others that you're investing in benefited from that kind of enthusiasm and curiosity. But now I'd pose that we're reaching what may be, in hindsight, the peak of the hype cycle. And in Gartner terminology, that could mean that we're entering the trough of disillusionment, where maybe the benefits, the ROI are being questioned, and we're back to evaluating software and investments in technology in a more traditional, rational way. To the extent you agree with that thesis, how does that kind of factor into the way that you're evaluating investments, and maybe how you think about the oftentimes lofty projections that entrepreneurs pose in the course of a funding cycle?
Yeah, we're a little bit, insulated in a good way, because AI applied to tax or AI applied to legal are two areas where it just makes sense, right? So we've done vertical AI investing from day one. Like, we never really said we're going to go out and figure out how to invest in these, infrastructure companies or models, with the exception of CentML. I would say we haven't really looked at a lot of companies that are more generic or more broad based AI tools. We've tended to really focus on verticalization of it. And that's, I think, turned out in our favor, because I think people have now moved in that direction, because that's where you can get return on investment, right? So another company, AI company we invested in was Neotax, Silicon Valley based company that does AI tax credits. So they tie into Jira and Slack and GitHub, and they pull all the data and they run a model against what you're spending in research and development, which is huge. Today, you'd have to go to an auditor and have, PwC or KPMG come in and do this massive audit. It's very costly. Where if you could just pull the data from your systems and come up with a very accurate estimate that is, accepted by the IRS, right? The tax folks, then this is a much better way to do that, right? You can save a ton of money. You can apply AI to it. So I think we continue to look at solutions that actually solve really big problems that you can automate with AI, versus some of these harder, infrastructure type technologies that, it's tough to figure out how you're going to make money, and how you're going to, and the expense of building these big models. How do you turn that into revenue is turning out to be challenging, right? So the model is going to flip, right? Because if you're using one of those models and now you're a vertical AI solution and now you're making a ton of money, the underlying model is going to have to come back and take some of that revenue at some point, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of flipping in how money is shared in some of these solutions that are working and, getting a lot of traction.
Neotax is a great example. Let's unpack what the introduction of AI means specifically for the legal industry. And just for context, recently we had a guest on the show, a guy named Jim McKenna, he's been a CIO in legal firms for 30 years.
Wow.
And just a walking time capsule, amazing person, a historian, and just he really educated me and our audience about some of the opportunities and challenges of introducing AI into the legal profession. So let's say from your seat, presumably you're an AI enthusiast and looking at opportunities where AI will benefit the legal profession. And certainly as a client of a very high-priced law firm, I hope that PeopleRain will benefit from that trend. But let's take the other side of that. If I'm an attorney or maybe a kid in law school, how should I be thinking about what AI is going to do to the career that I had planned?
Yeah, I think they're coming in a really fortunate time, right? Because a lot of the stuff that first year law students, second year law students had to do in a firm wasn't very fun, right? It's, oh, this is the dregs, if you will, of the work that is available in the law firm goes to the first and second year law. A lot of that is going to be automated, right? And so I think from their perspective, they're going to be able to do much more of what they were trained to do in law school much faster. So it's going to be, I think, far more interesting if you're going to be a lawyer, that you'll actually be doing real work much faster and adding to the revenue of the law firm. If you think about it, right now you have these lawyers, junior lawyers, if you will, go and do all this research on citing cases and, putting everything in, the research. It takes, days, if not weeks or months on some cases to pull this together. That can be pulled together now in hours. Now you still need somebody to go back and check it all, right? Because no lawyer is going to just wing it and just say, this is perfect, right? So they're going to go back and check it all. But I do think it's going to save a lot of time, right? And so those early in career lawyers are going to be doing much, much more interesting work, much faster in their career. And I think law firms will, a year ago, we had a conference it was 2022, December of 2022. It was the Legal Tech Fund conference. It's in Miami every year. We sponsored it the first year. We sponsored it this last year. We'll probably do it again this year. And the lawyers that were there were like very hesitant. Maybe we'll use it for this little piece or that. And we actually met Spellbook there, which was one of our first legal tech AI investments, and they're amazing. And a year later, the same panels, same lawyers, judges were there. The conference was sold out, within a matter of weeks. And everybody was like, no, like a law firm can't not use AI, right? Because the speed to get things done is so much faster using the technology. You've got to double and triple check it, right? You got to know the sources. Exactly what you were talking about earlier in the podcast is, for your company, knowing the chain of where things came from is, critical, not only in HR, but in people, but also in legal, right? So I think that'll be, people are going to have to make sure they understand where it's coming from, but it's still going to speed things up drastically.
I frequently say AI is good at doing tasks, but not doing jobs. I will make an exception, however, for paralegals. I think there's a lot that a paralegal does. I know from firsthand experience as a client of high-priced attorneys that the compliance work, the filing, things like that, I do believe could be largely automated with AI. Is that consistent with what you're hearing?
Yeah, 100%. Yep. We hear it all the time. And we see it, right? In some of the products that are coming out, even some of the products that Thomson Reuters has, as we enable them and add AI to them, it's going to, and you have to think about our own products. We have the sources, right? So you're pulling from Westlaw, you're pulling from Practical Law. We know those sources are good, right? So the answers that are going to come out are going to be correct. So from that perspective, I think, it really does go back to the point that you talked about early on, is just knowing where those sources are and where they're coming from. But yeah, a lot of those tasks are going to be automated. I think there's still going to be paralegal jobs, right? Because there's still work that can be done, harder work, less mundane work, some of that, filing, like you said, and you can automate a ton of that work.
I also frequently say that if you're in a career where your role is that easily automated, now's a great time to be thinking about upskilling or reskilling into a role that is not that easily automated. And I think that I share frequently that AI will be a net creator of new jobs. And while things like paralegals may be at risk, think of all the things that uniquely require human skills that those paralegals would really enjoy doing more than being a paralegal. So I see it as a great opportunity.
Yeah, I completely agree. My daughter's actually a middle school teacher, a math teacher, And I always talk to her about that. Do you think AI is going to, she goes, Mom, unless AI is going to become empathetic, I don't think there's going to be a reason to not have teachers in front of kids. Now, that said, is she going to have more tools? Is there going to be more automation in the way you can generate the information to make your job better, right? And make the children learn more easily, of course, right? And it's the same thing in legal, and it's the same thing in tax. I think some of those mundane tasks are going to be automated, and the more difficult ones will still be, you're going to require people to do those things.
Even when AI is, quote, sentient, whatever that means to you or to the listeners, and we've achieved, quote, AGI, whatever that means, artificial general intelligence, but there's no clear definition, I firmly believe that there will still be a need for empathy and rational thinking and exercising judgment, and no place more than in the classroom. Until the students are bots, I believe the teachers need to be humans to be able to, help the human students, cultivate these skills. So your daughter is in the right profession.
It's tough, but she loves it.
Hey, Tamara, we're about out of time, but I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last question for me. So before we started recording, we were talking about just some of the waves that we've lived through in technology, going back to our email days and mobile days and app days and cloud days and SaaS days. Some say that AI is just another tech cycle, and there'll be another version of AI or tech that dominates the headlines when this kind of current wave rolls over. Others say it's truly disruptive and it's more than just a tech platform shift. What does Tamara think about that?
I think it's truly disruptive, right? And if you listen, I like what our CEO says, and I'm not saying it just because he says it, but, and I think you and I have lived through a number of eras, if you will, but, the mobile device, right? Did you ever really think you were going to do everything on it, right? And, there's literally nothing you can't do on your mobile device, or I believe I could do everything on it because I come from that world. So I do think this is a change, right? So we went through the change of everybody being able to do everything on mobile, right? To everything moving to the cloud. Remember when folks, you and I talked a little bit about it, where people were like, oh, we're going to keep everything on-prem. That's not a thing anymore. In fact, nobody wants anything on-prem just about anymore. Is this the next wave of moving things to using AI to reduce costs and speed things up? 100%. I do not think I think this is truly disruptive. I think it will continue to be disruptive. I think we've got a few years of technology really, taking over a lot of those mundane tasks as we've talked about, but 100% it's truly disruptive.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Tamara, we're out of time, but where can the audience learn more about you and the work of Thomson Reuters Ventures?
Yeah, so we do have a website, trventures.com is our ventures website. I'm at Tamara Steffens on LinkedIn, so anybody can message me there. Would love to look at any new investments if people think they fit into our thesis, tax, legal, risk, fraud, general infrastructure for AI. We'd love to hear from you. And it was really delightful. I agree, Dan, we should have met years ago, apparently.
Unbelievable.
We must have crossed paths at some point.
It's like hanging out with an old friend, huh?
Yeah, it's great.
This was so much fun. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks so much, Dan.
You bet. That's all the time that we have for this week on AI and the future of work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.